It's 6 p.m. time for the news bulletin on Channel 2. I am Basma Taha, and starting off with the main headlines of the day. President Sisi meets with the Sudan's Sovereign Council Chief Al-Burhan on recent developments. UN urges reopening of Rafah border crossing as Israeli cuts to aid for Gaza loom. And Pakistan says it has agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire with Afghanistan. Welcome back to the news in full. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stressed Egyptian position towards unfolding developments in Sudan remains stable, asserting full support to the neighboring country's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and its rejection of all attempts to threaten its security, national cohesion, or to form parallel entities to the legitimate Sudanese government. The remarks were made as the president held a meeting with the visiting Sudan Sovereignty Council Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan that was attended by Foreign Minister Badr Abdul Ati and General Intelligence Chief Hassan Rashid. The meeting discussed the field situation in Sudan as well as international regional efforts to put an end to the war in Sudan and to ensure its stability. For his part, General Al-Burhan voiced appreciation for Egypt's stances in support of Sudan and President Sisi efforts in particular. The meeting hailed the four-way mechanism as an umbrella for seeking a settlement to the Sudanese crisis, ending the war and achieving sole stability. The two leaders look forward to the mechanism upcoming meeting in Washington this month. Also, the meeting also tackled updates in the Nile water file, and both sides reiterated rejection of any unilateral moves affecting the Blue Nile in contradiction with the international law. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli said today that Egypt's leadership and people are performing their duty with absolute strength and integrity in support for the Palestinian people and their rights in an independent Palestinian state. The Prime Minister made these remarks in a press conference after he chaired a weekly cabinet meeting. Also, Madbouli announced that Egypt's readiness to host an international conference on the reconstruction of Gaza once the recently sealed ceasefire deal is upheld. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Councillor Hanafi Gibeli, received head of the National Council for Human Rights Ambassador Mahmoud Karim on Wednesday. The Speaker said that amendments to the law regulating the Council are significant steps towards modernizing the existing legal framework in accordance with recent legislative modernization witnessed by the state. The meeting comes within the ongoing consultation and coordination between the Parliament and the Human Rights Council at the aim of protecting and promoting human rights in Egypt. The Council is an independent national authority that adheres to Paris principles and related international standards. Humanitarian aid and relief supplies coming from Egypt continued entering into the besieged Gaza Strip on Wednesday as part of Zaid al-Izza initiative that began in late July to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians in the enclave where hunger crisis continued. Trucks carrying aid and fuels are heading to the Karm Abu Salim and Ouga crossings as part of the 50th convoy under the initiative. The Egyptian Red Crescent is preparing 450 trucks to enter through the two border crossings that Israel said it reopened aid since October the 5th under a ceasefire agreement. The UN and aid organizations have urged the complete reopening of the major crossing of Rafah from the Israeli-occupied Palestinian side as Gaza faces a devastating humanitarian crisis due to 2 years of Israeli war of genocide in the territory. The move came after an Israeli military agency said it would slash aid deliveries to Gaza by half. Details follow.
The UN aid agency working in the Gaza Strip said aid is slowly returning back to the Gaza Strip for the first time in months, but warned against Israeli plans to slash allowed aid by half. The aid agencies urged the complete reopening of the major crossings of Rafah as Gaza faces a devastating starvation and humanitarian crisis due to the 2 years of Israeli war of genocide in the territory. The aid was returning following a ceasefire agreement brokered by the US that was endorsed in an international peace summit hosted in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh resort on Monday. The spokesperson for the UN Humanitarian Office in Gaza said on Tuesday that 817 trucks of aid have entered the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire took effect last week. She, however, warned that the ceasefire has ended the fighting, but it hasn't ended the crisis. She confirmed to reporters that their office had received a notice from an Israeli military agency that aid deliveries would be limited, adding that we continue to encourage the parties to adhere to the arrangements that have been set out in the ceasefire parameters. The UN World Food Programme Director for Gaza said that opening all crossings for food and aid to flood the Gaza Strip is a top priority, and he hopes world leaders who attended Monday's summit in Egypt will push this forward. Antoine Renard said that the ceasefire opens the way for a scale-up in aid, but it's just the beginning of relation to the proper recovery. He added that what is so adamant is that you have all the different capacity to reach population where they are. Since the 5th of October, the UN has reinstated 10 industrial bakeries into central and southern Gaza. He said it's practically 500,000 people being covered now with bread. Renard said the UN hopes to see at least 24 bakeries as part of its scale-up of aid. The ongoing starvation and humanitarian crisis, the widespread destruction, and the sheer number of over 68,000 people killed in Gaza during the war are grounds for genocide by Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinians.
Gaza medical sources said the Palestinian death toll in the Israeli aggression in Gaza rose to 69,938 after 25 bodies arrived at hospitals in the last 24 hours, mostly after their bodies were bags of Palestinians who had been detained by the Israeli military since the war began in October 2023. The UN Development Agency said the amount of devastation brought by Israeli war in the Gaza Strip is enormous, making the amount and size of the challenge to rebuild the Strip huge. A special representative of UNDP administrator for a program to help Palestinians said the latest joint estimate from the UN, the European Union, and the World Bank is that $7 billion will be required to rebuild Gaza. The figure was tallied in September and up from $53 billion estimated in February. Israeli occupation forces killed 1 Palestinian and detained 5 others in North Jerusalem on Wednesday. The forces attacked a number of houses at El Arub camp in northern Hebron province, where they seized 4 Palestinians during the early hours. Meanwhile, the Israeli army closed the entrance of a village in northeast of Ramallah as they prevented the residents to enter or get out of the village. This came after the release of 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, and detainees offers a rare glimpse into the immediate health impacts in Israel, and some of those released on Monday are suffering from a range of health problems they developed during years in Israeli detention in the occupied West Bank. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Wednesday, marking his first visit to Russia since Moscow ally President Bashar al-Assad was toppled by rebels led by Shara last year. Sana'a reported that the two leaders discussed regional and international developments and ways that Syria and Russia can cooperate. Syrian official source said that al-Shara is also set to hold talks on the continued presence of Russia's Navy base, and Moscow has since attempted to preserve ties with Syrian new authorities. In July, Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with Syrian Foreign Minister Asad al-Shaybani in Moscow. The Russian Defense Ministry said today that its troops had taken control and pushed the Ukrainian forces out of two settlements. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials said that the network overload and the huge effects of previous Russian attacks triggered blackouts in Kiev and other Ukrainian regions. Russian attacks in recent weeks have concentrated on energy targets, and a wave of strikes on Kiev and other areas last week left more than 1 million households and businesses without power across the country. Pakistan said on Wednesday it agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire with Afghanistan following days of violence that have killed dozens of people on both sides of the border. Pakistan Foreign Ministry said the ceasefire was at Afghanistan request. Pakistan military said that around 20 Taliban were killed early on Wednesday. It added that around 30 Taliban and affiliated fighters were also suspected to have been killed in separate overnight clashes. On the other side, the Afghani officials said that more than 20 Afghan civilians were killed and over 100 others were wounded. This is the second time this week that the two sides have traded fire across multiple border regions. Welcome back. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli witnessed the signing ceremony of a cooperation agreement between Egypt and the United Arab Emirates to finalize studies for an electrical interconnection project with neighboring countries with the use of undersea cables. Also, the Egyptian Electricity Transmission Company and the UAE K&K Investment Company signed the agreement, which came within the state efforts to expand electricity interconnection with a regional partner and also to make Egypt an energy hub for cross-continental power transmission. Minister of Investment and Foreign Trade Hassan Al-Khatib said that Egypt is implementing a comprehensive economic program aimed at building a more flexible, diversified and competitive economy based on effective partnership with the private sector. The investment minister remarks were made during his meeting with Jan Frederick, head of Europe, Middle East and Africa sovereign rating at Fitch rating agency that took place in the U.S. The meeting focused on recent developments in the Egyptian economy and the government efforts to improve the Egyptian sovereignty rating. Egypt's bourse closed higher today amid purchases by Arab and foreign investors and local and Arab corporations against sell-off foreign investment funds and local investors. The market capital of listed companies added 15 billion Egyptian pounds, reaching 2.6 trillion pounds at the end of transactions. Benchmark index EGX 30 rose 0.52%, and the equal-weighted indices EGX 70 and EGX 100 climbed 0.94 and 0.73%. Welcome back. South Africa is back at the World Cup for the first time since hosting the tournament in 2010. South Africa secured a spot in North America. Qatar coach called his side's qualification for next summer World Cup finals truly special after a 2-1 win over the... Dear viewers, by that we come to the end of our news bulletin. Thanks for watching. That was Basmata signing off.